Before I start, I invite you to take time to pause and check in with yourself and create a space for the information to follow by situating yourself in a wellness mindset. Are you comfortable right now? Do you need to stretch or move? Take a few breaths, sit in the sunshiny spot, grab a glass of water, coffee, or tea. Give yourself a moment. I'm Jeanette Walker, Health Promotion Facilitator with Alberta Health Services, Community Addiction and Mental Health. I would like to take a moment to acknowledge that we are gathered today on Treaty 6, 7, and 8 and Métis Region 1, 2, 3, and 4, a traditional meeting place and a home for many Indigenous people whose languages and cultures continue to influence our vibrant communities. Our recognition of this land is an act of reconciliation and an expression of our gratitude to those whose territory we reside on or are visiting. You will learn today when stress is helpful and when it is harmful. You will learn about the signs of stress and to identify your own stressors. You will learn ideas for building on healthy actions to mitigate the effects of stress on you, and you will learn about information for additional supports. To begin, I would like to provide a definition so we all have a common language that we can use and understand. Our mental health is important, just like our physical health. According to the World Health Organization, mental health is defined as a state of well-being in which every individual realizes his or her own potential, can cope with the normal stresses of life, can work productively and fruitfully, and is able to make a contribution to his or her community. Like physical health, we all need to care for our mental health at every stage of life, and talking is the first step. Talking about our mental health is the first step in taking care of our overall health. Sometimes people worry about talking about their feelings and mood, like something's wrong with them. We all have mental health. Talking helps decrease stigma, so it makes it easier for all of us to discuss our mental health. And in turn, it helps the world around us be stronger and more resilient. I should also mention the mental health continuum, which describes the phases of mental well-being, from healthy, reacting, injured, and ill, and the action steps to take at each phase. People may find themselves in different phases depending on the day, workload, and events in their lives. If you notice that you're over on the right-hand side of this continuum, or are hearing from others that your behavior and reactions are similar to those, help is available. It is a good idea to talk with someone about it and to seek help. And if you're in crisis, seek help immediately. At the end of this talk, I will provide some helpful resources. Today we're examining both stress and stressors. It's important to understand what these are as a first step in understanding your personal well-being. Stress is the reaction to stressors. It's your own personal reaction to stressors. And stressors are the things causing us stress that we have no control over or very little control over. You may be thinking about stressors in your life right now. Here are some words that others have used to identify their stressors. Things like finances, deadlines, schedules, workload, and even traffic can be identified as a stressor. Everyone has their own type of stressors, and what is a stressor for one person isn't for another. For oftentimes, stressors are the things that we care about, and that we care about the most. And you may have stressors that are different than what you see here. We are all unique, and we all have our own stressors. This diagram is an adaptation of what is known as the Yerkes-Dodson law. Modern-day psychologists use this model to look at the relationship between the level of stress we experience and the work we do. When we're under too much or too little stress, our performance suffers. On the green part of the diagram, if we don't have enough challenge, we can feel bored. Doing or having a challenge can improve performance. This is what people sometimes refer to as good or adaptive stress, or having a challenge. And that's in the yellow part. Having an appropriate challenge can motivate and focus us to learn and to do new things. Sometimes, though, after we reach a point of maximum efficiency with challenges, we reach our peak performance. And when and where that curve peaks is different for everybody. In the orange and red section, once we move past our peak performance, our ability to perform at our best becomes compromised. And just a note about the heroic efforts of many people throughout the COVID-19 pandemic. Many have reached that peak and have moved into burnout. This is a serious concern. If we don't recognize and do something about it, or we're not able to address it, we can end up exhausted and possibly with health complications. So while a challenge can feel energizing or thrilling or exciting, when it starts to leave us feeling angry, frustrated, overwhelmed, and exhausted, and if there is too much or too many stressors over a prolonged period of time, it can become harmful. And that's where you find us in the red part. Sometimes stress can become the norm. People start to feel like it's their normal way of being and just resign themselves to not being able to do anything about it. And as I mentioned, this is a serious concern. But what could happen to the curve if we nurture ourselves and stay resilient? We all know of people that have amazing capacity in times of stress, while others may reach that peak performance much earlier. And we ask ourselves, how does this happen? Later on in this talk, I'll go over a few ideas to nurture ourselves and cultivate resilience. If we can understand our stressors and can recognize when we're experiencing stress, we can do something to influence the curve. Here are some facts about stress. We will never be stress-free, and everyone experiences stress. Humans are hardwired to survive through this mechanism in the body called the stress response system. Essentially, the stress response is a warning sign that something isn't right. For example, the stress response saves your life when you encounter a dangerous situation by giving you the energy to escape. As I mentioned, small amounts of stress are motivating to help us achieve and do our best, but large amounts, especially if they're ongoing and severe, become chronic and may contribute to mental and physical health problems. Additionally, the signs of stress are different for everyone, and as we adapt to chronic stress, we become used to it, and we may not recognize our own physical, mental, behavioral, and emotional reactions as stress. But if we are able to tune into ourselves and recognize those signs, and then take steps to nurture and care for ourselves, what would happen? In this next section, I'm going to look at how we know when we're stressed. When not okay is truly not okay. Stress feels rotten, and it may impact your health and your ability to think clearly and to respond appropriately and to perform at your best and your quality of life. I did mention earlier that sometimes stress can be helpful, such as helping us prepare for a big project or learning something new. But for today's purposes, we're focusing on stress that negatively impacts our mind and our bodies if not attended to. What are the warning signs of stress? In the physical domain, the warning signs of stress may show up as digestive problems, or weight gain or loss, or increased heart rate or high blood pressure. In the cognitive or mental domain, the warning signs of stress may show up as difficulty focusing or memory loss or forgetfulness. In the emotional domain, the warning signs of stress may be easily upset or crying, or just feeling unhappy, or being irritable or short-tempered. And in the behavioral domain, stress may show up as too little or too much sleep, or procrastinating and putting things off, or being unable to relax. So stress is our physical, our mental or cognitive, behavioral and emotional reactions to a stressor. We call those the warning signs of stress. And what are your warning signs? Do you see some of them on here? Are any of your signs different? Looking at the types of stress, we categorize them. Acute or short-term stress helps us learn how to adapt and grow. Situations that cause positive stress have short increases in heart rate and mild increases in hormone levels. And stress like this can happen daily, often many times a day. And recall the yellow part of the graph that I showed you earlier. Tolerable stress is lumped in with acute stress because it's usually short-term, but it does start that body's stress response to a greater degree. Tolerable stress involves situations where there's a more serious impact, such as death or divorce, or a disaster. Tolerable stress occurs multiple times throughout life, but we do know strong supportive relationships help buffer the effects of tolerable stress. And there's a good chance we can bounce back from small amounts of acute or tolerable stress. Stress becomes chronic when it's prolonged and extreme, or we will become this way if there are multiple severe stress events stacking up in a shorter time frame. In this situation, the stress response just stays turned on. This kind of stress can increase the risk for chronic disease, both mental and physical, and it's more difficult to bounce back from. This is when not okay is not okay. If you are experiencing severe, prolonged, or extreme stress, it's a good idea to talk with someone about it because help is available and it's confidential and free. At the end of this talk, I will offer some helpful resources. We shouldn't talk about the effects of chronic and severe stress without talking about the ways to protect and mitigate the effects of it on yourself. When we nurture resilience, we're building ourselves up and strengthening ourselves to have the best chance of managing a chronic, severe, stressful situation during difficult times. Sometimes we can experience ambivalence or feel that it's wrong to allow time for ourselves. For example, responders or parents or caregivers or even people working in the human service field often tend to think of and support others first, even to the exclusion of their own needs and well-being. It can be helpful to take time to explore this perspective for yourself and examine if you are neglecting yourself. Often the last person caregivers nurture is themselves. When we are taking steps to relieve stress, we are nurturing resilience in ourselves and others. Resilience, stated, is the capacity to recover quickly from difficulties. And the word quickly is in brackets because how quickly we bounce back or recover depends on the severity of the situation. However, in general, a resilient person recovers faster than one who hasn't taken care of themselves. Nurturing ourselves starts with self-awareness. To effectively manage overwhelming emotions and stress reactions, we first have to be able to identify what we're experiencing. You may have difficulty naming your emotions, and that is perfectly normal. For example, you may be feeling sad, but it doesn't adequately identify your feelings. Expanding outward on the emotions wheel, it may determine that your sadness is really boredom and apathy or tiredness. You do have to name it to tame it. This can be a helpful practice for checking in with yourself, build awareness, or to use when you notice those warning signs of stress in yourself. When you name your emotions, you can begin the work of managing any difficult emotions or stress reactions. For example, work towards managing sadness, maybe finding more meaning in your life, or getting more sleep. You may also use it to help others identify the emotions they're experiencing. And you can Google emotions wheel and find many different emotion wheels, and all are useful to refer to. So when you're checking in with yourself, ask yourself, how am I feeling right now? Do I want to stay here or shift from here? Sometimes you want to maintain that emotion, especially if it's a happy one. But if that emotion is unpleasant, ask, what will I do to shift this emotion? Next, I'm going to look at some helpful practices for shifting emotions. We describe these ways of nurturing ourselves or nurturing resilience as self-care. Whatever name you give it, self-care is the key to setting yourself up for wellness and having the capacity to navigate and be stronger through challenges and difficult times. Self-care is described as activities and practices that we can engage in on a regular basis to reduce stress and maintain and enhance our short and longer-term health and well-being. There are many unique and different practices and activities that may be done to care for oneself. We also refer to self-care as healthy coping. And at no point are we ever done knowing how to best take care of ourselves. Our needs change and evolve, and therefore we must maintain an attitude of caring. Self-care shouldn't happen just once a year at a spa visit, or on one weekend a year when grandparents take kids, or in the month of January after you've made some New Year's resolutions. Self-care is activities and practices we engage in on a regular basis, that when we do them we feel better. In the process of feeling better, we enhance our short and longer-term mental and physical health and well-being. And it is also good to note that a variety of self-care practices is best in the long run, in case you go to practice what your go-to practice isn't possible. For example, if running or jogging was one of your main self-care practices and you break your leg, you need something else to sustain you in the months ahead while your leg is healing. These are what we have heard from many people when they describe what they do for self-care, to relieve stress and nurture resilience. So I ask you, what activities do you engage in? Is there anything in here that you might want to try? And is there anything that you do that's not on this list? We all know these self-care essentials, and I may not be telling you anything new, but we all need reminders from time to time. These are the self-care essentials. Things like eating well, making an effort to eat a healthy, balanced diet helps to manage our mood and build immunity, just as an example. Being active keeps the brain and body healthy and has a significant benefit towards improving and sustaining mental and physical health. Drinking water and maintaining proper hydration keeps the body and mind in balance. Having a good quality sleep also has a significant benefit towards our well-being. Positive self-talk helps cope during difficult times by making you feel happier. Connections to others is another very important practice to care for yourself. Keep learning to stay open to yourself and to your feelings and needs, and to set goals and consider new ways to strengthen yourself. Other simple self-care practices include things like practicing kindness and gratitude, and this benefits you as much as it does the recipient. Taking time to notice what is around you with a kind and caring attitude, or mindfulness. This is a way to manage stress and build resilience. Interests, hobbies such as crafts, art, photography, and music have been identified by many as ways that they use to relieve stress. Keeping a routine is grounding. Humans function best with a routine. Having a routine gives the opportunity to incorporate daily self-care into your life, to do the things that you enjoy, and relieve the effects of stress. If you were to think about a realistic plan to care for yourself, where would you start? Here is a plan for self-care. What are my self-care needs right now? How am I feeling right now? I'm checking in with myself. And how am I feeling? What are my self-care needs right now? And choose two that you can give your attention to today. Consider the self-care practices you've used or have used in the past. And what are those energizing and calming strategies that you could go to? Pick two that you feel are achievable and reasonable for today. What is the minimum thing you can do for yourself today or this week? And this may change from day to day, depending on what's going on or your energy and supports in your life. For example, today you might not be able to do anything but take 5 minutes for a cup of coffee to relax, but on another day you may have time to go out for a walk outside. And ask yourself who and what helps you. Think about who your supports are and how they would help you. These are good questions to ask yourself, and they will take you through making a feasible plan. A final note about a plan. Waiting until you're in a crisis to start self-care will make it harder to stick with. Start now, start today, no matter if you're mildly stressed or experiencing chronic stress. Think of self-care as filling a cup. Remember, if your cup is empty, you can bounce back from those small stressors, but it's harder to bounce back from unexpected or severe stressors when your cup is empty. That is what daily practices are so important. Daily practices fill your cup. They strengthen your resilience, and they prepare you for difficult times. In summary, humans are hardwired to survive severe stressors through the stress response system. Stress may be helpful when we're learning or growing, but it can be harmful if it is chronic and severe. Stressors cause us stress and are often the things that we care about the most, but we have no or little control over. Simple self-care practices that are right for you build your resiliency and strengthens you to help you enjoy your life and to cope during difficult times. Where to go for help? Help in Tough Times, albertahealthservices.ca, Help in Tough Times has great resources and information. An online peer support portal called TogetherAll at togetherall.com is a great place to go for support. Calling HealthLink at 811 will direct you to mental health and addiction supports. 211 Alberta or alberta.211.ca, you can go there to find local agencies providing subsidized supports. Private service providers can be found on the website psychologytoday.com. And as I mentioned, if you're in crisis, call 911 or go to your nearest emergency department. It's been an honor to speak with you today. I wish you well.